Try to imagine yourself on a boat when someone suddenly tells you to get off. There's no dock, and all you can see are violent waters and sharp rocks. You're pushed off the boat, and you're left to fend for yourself as you see the ship begin to leave. Leprosy, also known as Hansen's disease, is an infectious disease caused by bacteria called Mycobacterium leprae. The bacteria itself is actually closely related to the bacteria that causes tuberculosis. Leprosy is very rare due to its small genome. The bacteria is an obligate intracellular pathogen, which means it lacks a number of functional genes, causing it to have to live inside a cell, like a virus, rather than on its own, like normal bacteria. This is one of the reasons why leprosy is difficult to study. Another reason is that it grows very slowly. For example, a common bacteria like E. coli divides about every 15 to 20 minutes. On the other hand, leprosy divides about every 30 days. Leprosy travels through respiratory droplets produced by coughing, sneezing, and even breathing, but it has an extremely long incubation period. This means it can be years before you even know you have leprosy. On average, the incubation period lasts about 5 years. However, it can be from 1 to 20 years before you even know you've been affected. While this seems scary, it takes close and extended contact with someone who actually has the disease to catch the infection. Additionally, according to the CDC, about 95% of people have a natural immunity to leprosy, due to their immune response being sufficient enough to fight off infection. Leprosy thrives in lower temperatures, meaning that it will most often affect hands, feet, and other extremities. There are 3 main forms of leprosy. From the least severe is the tuberculoid form, which only affects the sensation in peripheral nerves. According to an article written by Jasvinder Chawla, this means any nerves that aren't part of your central nervous system. The most severe is known as leprotomus, and it causes blistery skin lesions filled with active bacteria on the hands, feet, nose, and other extremities. The third is called borderline, and it's just somewhere in between the first 2. So, even though the disease isn't very dangerous and it's quite difficult to spread, it didn't stop people from shunning individuals who were victims of leprosy. The reason the CDC doesn't refer to Hansen's disease as leprosy anymore is because of the stigma that comes with the word and the treatments of the individuals with the disease in the past. Victims were often shunned and rejected by society. Here are some examples of what happened to people with leprosy, from best to worst. Some individuals were forced to wear bells and capes. The bells were to let other people know you were coming, and the capes hid their bodies. You would be considered lucky if this is all that happened to you. Others were forced to stand in freshly dug graves. Then a priest would throw dirt on you and say, I quote, "You are dead to the world, and all of your earthly possessions are taken away. Your marriage is dissolved." If both parents were affected, their children would become orphans. After this, the victims were forced to go to a leprosarium, which is essentially a secluded kind of quarantine where these individuals were forced to stay forever. And finally, the worst thing that would happen is the individuals with leprosy would be forced to undergo assisted suicide. This would entail either burning or drowning to death. Additionally, because priests were diagnosing leprosy rather than actual professionals, people who didn't even have leprosy would undergo these treatments. Leprosy was most widespread during the Dark Age, about 500 to 1500 AD. And since those times, the majority of leprosariums were abandoned. However, one continued to run all the way until the 1960s, but many people still live at this now National Historical Park. I'm talking about Kalaupapa, a peninsula on the Hawaiian island of Molokai. According to the hosts of This Podcast Will Kill You, Aaron Welsh and Aaron Allman Updike, in 1865, the Hawaiian king signed into law an act to prevent the spread of leprosy. This means it was considered illegal to even have the disease, and if you were caught having leprosy, you were forcefully sent to the leper colony on Molokai. Your marriage would be dissolved, and your will would be executed. While this already sounds terrible, actually getting to Molokai was far worse. You'd be dropped off by boat, and there was no dock. The peninsula itself was surrounded by an extremely rocky coastline and huge sea cliffs. Additionally, the wind current is so strong that when you stand on the shore, you can barely hear the people next to you. So, because of this, most ship captains would refuse to get close to the island and would drop leprosy victims right into the water to fend for themselves. Most healthy people would not even be able to make the swim, let alone people with leprosy. However, if you did manage to make it past the rocks and the wind and the sea cliffs, you'd finally make it to the leper colony. Hooray! Well, not really. Upon arrival, you would be greeted with the complete stripping of all of your human rights, possessions, and the promise of never seeing your family again. On Kalaupapa, there are no structures, no medical treatment, and the food and shelter were not guaranteed. The mortality rate for the first 5 years on the island was 46%, and the total population peaked in 1890 at 1,174. So, while the people on the peninsula no longer functions as a colony, individuals with leprosy still live there. And of course, the conditions are far better now, but much like the rest of our world's history, it's important to remember what happened so we can prevent it from ever happening again. Thank you.